ever wonder what the future of work will look like? In the Hope at Work podcast, you will be exposed to new workplace norms, modern technologies, and unconventional ideas, all from a positive point of view. You'll never look at work the same way again. Welcome, Cory Scheer. So good to have you on the Hope at Work podcast.
Thank you, Marcus. It is great to be on the show with you. Thanks for the invite.
You bet. So, Cory, I think you have an extremely interesting background. And somewhat recently, you decided to do something pretty bold. So maybe we can start by just hearing about your career journey and what led you to creating TrustCentric.
That sounds great. So I have been doing a deep dive in this work around trust for almost 10 years and have been a part of various organizations, leadership positions, and have always loved the topic of leadership, but have also been in experiences where I felt like there were more opportunities to strengthen workplace culture and have a deeper, more specific understanding of what are the elements that create more trust within a company. And as a result of that, I was really passionate about this topic in my doctoral work. I completed my dissertation. I used a theoretical framework that focused in on the core elements of trust. And one of my commitments coming out of my doctoral research was that I wanted that doctoral research to live on beyond just my educational experience. And I'd invested time and money into the program, and so I wanted it to live on. And as a result of that, I just began having conversations with people like you, leaders who were in the midst of growing a company or being a part of a company. And as we had these types of conversations, I learned more and more that there were continued opportunities for leaders and teams to have a better understanding of what it takes to strengthen trust, to take this universal truth that can sometimes be elusive and make it more practical and more tangible, make it more of an asset as opposed to something that is more of a mystery. And so that's been my work specifically over the last 15 months when I founded my company called TrustCentric. And it was one of those moments. I wrote a number up on my marker board in my personal study, and I said, that's the number that we have to hit in order to pay all of our bills. And I basically burned the ships and said, we're going all in. And so it's been quite a ride.
I love that. I love the burn the ships analogy. So, Cory, what led you to develop such a strong interest in trust to begin with? And why do you think it's so important in the workplace?
It's a great question. What I realized was that most businesses approach customer and employee loyalty through a lens that is primarily focused on creating value, which there's nothing wrong with creating value as something that is really very important. We are always asking the question in our own mind, is it worth it? Is it worth it for me to spend the time on that? Is it worth it for me to spend the money on that product? Is it rare? Is it aesthetic? Is it emotional? Is it something that I am willing to give up one of my resources in order to get whatever it is that I am purchasing or contributing my time to? But what the research shows, interestingly, is that although value is a critical element of the loyalty equation, there's a step before that. And the step before that is all about strengthening trust. And so the sequence of it is not starting with value in order to create loyalty. What the research says is that the sequence is actually starting with trust, then value becomes the mediator and basically the bridge between trust and loyalty. So simplistically, what it says is that if I increase the level of trust within a personal or relational exchange with my customers and with my employees, as the value proposition naturally increases, so too will the loyalty. And that's obviously one of the most important pursuits as a leader, as a member of a team, as an organization, that we are ultimately gaining authentic loyalty from our employees as well as our customers.
Yeah, I love that you actually refer to both employees and customers. The reality is this trust theoretical framework that you've developed is just as applicable in your relationship with customers as it is with employees. Cory, I know you wrote a book on this topic, leveraging that theoretical framework that you mentioned. Yeah, I love the book, actually. And if I recall correctly, there were three main elements that you focus on. So competence, caring. What was the third one?
The third one is problem solving. And so we can be very competent in our work, and we can even be kind individuals that care deeply for others. The book is called Closing the Trust Gap. This book experience, the writing experience, it has opened up so many doors. It has allowed me to have just a legitimate proof point and a tangible resource for people to engage with this conversation around trust. Even if they never hire me as a speaker or a consultant, it's wonderful to get feedback from people that say, I spent $16.99 on Amazon, and this book has become like our field manual for changing our workplace culture. That is amazing to me, and I'm so incredibly thankful that I have an opportunity to share it, even within book form, if that's the only interaction that people have with this work. If we're not actually solving the right problems, that is one of the critical elements of trust that can really affect workplace culture. So that those three elements, competency, which includes leadership competency, time management competency, project management, financial risk management, all of the competencies that we can learn, which we're a competency-based hiring culture. We look at resumes, we hear references, we see results. Those are typically driven towards competencies, which is great, but that unfortunately is not a complete view of what an employee needs to have in order to really strengthen trust. So it's also about problem solving and then demonstrating care for others. So the opportunity, but also the challenge when hiring individuals is how do we have an experience with them that helps us to better understand not only their competencies and their skill set, but also are we asking questions? Are we providing use cases or case studies to help them solve problems within an interview process? Are we creating environments where we step into it, whether it's meeting other people or maybe going out for lunch to see how they interact with people in the restaurant to where they demonstrate their care for others. But that's a more well-rounded and more trust-focused hiring practice versus just an interview, a resume, references, and let's hire them.
What I love about the Workforce Agility Limited Series by Cornerstone was we talked to executives and customers all about skills. Skills. Cornerstone has a wonderful background in learning and development, training, etc. Their LMS is world class, but they've centered the business now, not just on that, like building upon that, but building upon how everything has moved to the skills economy. So check out the limited series called Workforce Agility, and you can get it wherever you get your podcast. And it's just a wonderful series where we talk to their executives on the shift of why, and also their customers that are using it. So check it out whenever you get a chance. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I love the format. So I know you do workshops and interventions and speaking engagements. In your interaction in bringing this to life, have you noticed any kind of generational differences in terms of expectations related to trust at work?
That's a great question. I have not necessarily noticed anything significantly different between the generations. I think that there may be different experiences related to workplace culture and organizational trust. There is perhaps a little bit higher level of toxic resilience for people who have been in the marketplace or in their job longer, because maybe they have just accepted that this is the way it is. This is work. This is a job. We just have to deal with it. We have to just deal with hard bosses or difficult team members. And so there may be a bit more resilience or willingness to deal with that or accept it. But I've not necessarily noticed anything that is of significant difference. I do think that the younger generation is extremely sensitive and has very attuned trust radars, whether it's through written communication or verbal communication or even proximity and how a room is set up with a meeting. They pick up on distrust cues very quickly. And so they're highly sensitive to that. And also, one of the things that I do know from a generational standpoint is they may not necessarily feel as loyal to that company starting out. They may, because there are a lot of options in the marketplace and many industries, they may more quickly move to a different job opportunity. I have noticed that every generation deeply desires a high trust work environment, and every generation, in terms of working with each generational employee, they all are significantly affected when they do work within a toxic environment. And so that is true across all generations.
I agree. The other thing that I would point out about the younger generations is I think they have an authenticity radar. If they don't see that genuine authenticity at work, then they'll generally not stay. So talking about the next generation, that has grown up with new technologies. And obviously, we're getting introduced to even newer versions of generative AI and things that have the potential, at least, to significantly change the world of work. How do you think new technologies will either help or hinder trust in the future?
I think it will do both. And I ultimately think that it is up to the leader and the team and the organization to be able to steward that technology well. My favorite definition of trust is that trust is the firm belief in the truth of something. And so the most important question a leader or a team can ask, is this the truth? And what is our truth? And so if technology is used in a way that masks or hides or changes the truth, it will ultimately lead to, even though the value of that new truth might be high value and it may sell, that truth ultimately, if it's not trustworthy and if it is not the actual truth, it will ultimately have a deep impact on employees and customers. And so the other thing just to remember about trust is that trust is something that is highly relational and it is highly personal. And so this is where even we've experienced it over the last 3 or 4 years. The trust dynamic, if you only know someone via Zoom or virtually, there's a challenge there. You have to close that gap virtually, and ways that you can do that are by having honest conversations, ensuring that there are minimal distractions, making sure that people have their screens up so that you can actually see what they're doing. Maybe prevent your children from running behind you in the background, although that's made some incredible viral videos, which we've all appreciated. But those are the things where we have to work hard in a virtual context to strengthen trust and close that trust gap. It's easier, it's more natural to do that in person. But when we are in person, because trust is something that is so relational, that also requires a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah. So, Cory, for those folks that are new to being in a supervisory or managerial role, what would you recommend that they do in order to build trust with their teams?
Great question. The first thing is it always starts with a self-assessment. So 3 questions that every leader needs to ask themselves. Am I being as competent as I could be? Am I solving the right problems? Am I demonstrating care for others? Once you've done that self-evaluation and made a plan to improve those 3 building blocks, the next most important, what the data says, the most critical thing that we can do is listen actively to others. Take the time necessary to listen actively so that you can then take action on what matters most to them. And ultimately, it's an opportunity to strengthen trust, increase value, and ultimately increase the loyalty that employee or that customer has with you and your company.
So I think I remember you telling me from some of the research that you did that active listening is one of the most important elements of those kinds of relational, personal interactions. Am I correct in that assumption?
That's correct. And specifically in the building block of demonstrating care for others, it's not employee of the month or cookies in the mailbox or anything like that. The number one way by 7 percentage points over the next closest and best way to impact that care for others building blocks is by listening actively. So we should never take for granted the power of actually listening, not just hearing, but actively listening to somebody else with the intent to take action for their good.
Love it. Cory, anything we haven't talked about? Any final recommendations or comments that you want to make before we close things up?
What I love about the work that you are doing in regards to hope at work is that it's so connected to trust, because when we do not have a high trust environment, it diminishes our hope at a significant rate and a factor that is unfortunately sometimes not reversible. So when we think about the role of trust and the importance of trust and making it something that is top of mind and always a priority, what we're ultimately doing is we're helping cultivate a workplace culture, not just of trust, but also a workplace culture that is focused on hope for the individual, hope for the team, hope for the company. These are things that we must be about in order for us to have a workplace experience that is enjoyable and long lasting and one that we want to share with others.
Completely agree. Thanks for making that connection, Cory. I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time with us today. Really appreciate you joining the Hope at Work podcast, Cory.
Thank you so much, Marcus.